The dining room had always been my sanctuary. Its walls carried laughter from birthdays, the smoky fragrance of holiday hams, and gospel humming on lazy Sunday afternoons. But tonight, the room had teeth. The chandelier's crystals caught the light in sharp fragments, and every glimmer felt like a warning. I placed the peach cobbler still steaming, its cinnamon sugar crust bubbling at the edgesot, the center of the table. I had made it the same way my mama taught me when I was a girl in Birmingham, with love, patience, and a silent prayer that everyone who ate it would feel a piece of my soul. My son, David, sat at the head of the table, shoulders broad but slumped in the way men slump when they've lost their footing in life. His wife Marissa glowed in a ruby dress so tight it looked sewn onto her. Her nails sparkled when she lifted her wine glass. It was Marissa who fired the first bullet, you know, Angela. She said, my name dropping from her lips like spoiled fruit. You're not even half the woman my mother is. The words sliced through the air. For a second, the clinking forks and easy chatter froze. Even the air conditioner seemed to hold its breath. I stared at her, the smile on my lips trembling but not breaking. My chest tightened, but I didn't let her see me bleed. Then maybe, I said, pushing my chair back slowly, your mother should start paying your rent. David's fork clattered onto his plate. His eyes went wide, the way they did when he was a boy, and I caught him sneaking cookies before dinner. Rent? What rent? He barked, voice cracking. I felt the ground shift under us. Marissa's smirk faltered, her lipstick-painted mouth parting in surprise. She looked at David like he'd spoken a foreign language. The secret was out. I hadn't planned on revealing it that way. Lord knows, I had sworn to carry that burden quietly, the way I carried so many others. But something about Marissa's words, not half the woman my mother is, ripped the duct tape off my tongue. For 2 years, I had been covering their rent, sending money straight to their landlord while they paraded around Atlanta like royalty. Designer shoes, weekend trips, champagne brunches. They lived like the recession was just a rumor, whispered by unlucky people, and me. I stitched hems in my little sewing shop until my fingers swelled, patching other people's dreams while mine gathered dust in the attic. I cut my medication in half when the arthritis screamed through my joints. I pawned the necklace my late husband gave me for our 10th anniversary, all so David and Marissa could smile in Instagram photos with golden filters that it was supposed to be our secret. Mom, please, David had begged that night when he first came to me, his voice shaking like it did when he was 8 years old and broke the neighbor's window. Please don't tell Marissa. I don't want her to think less of me. I'll pay you back, I swear. I just need time. And like the fool I was, I agreed. Because mothers don't count the cost when their children are drowning. They just dive in, even if the water is freezing. Now, here we were. David's face was pale, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. Marissa's cheeks flushed crimson. What is she talking about, David? She hissed. I watched him squirm, torn between two loyalties, the wife he'd sworn to protect, and the mother who had kept him alive when he was born 2 months too early. Lungs fighting for breath. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out, so I spoke for him. Every month, I said, my voice steady, despite the storm in my chest. I've been sending your landlord $1,000, direct deposit, to keep you two from ending up on the street. The silence was thunderous. Marissa slammed her glass down, red wine splashing across the tablecloth like blood. You've been lying to me, she screamed at David. He flinched. I looked at my cobbler, still untouched, the crust cracking under the heat. Once, it had been a symbol of love. Tonight, it was just a witness to betrayal. Memories rushed at me like a flood. The nights I stayed up sewing gowns for rich women's daughters, while David slept in a cot by my side. The afternoons, I skipped meals so he could have a second helping of mac and cheese. The Christmas I sold my wedding china to buy him his first car, because I didn't want him riding the bus in the cold. All those sacrifices hidden quiet, unseen. Yet tonight I was not half the woman some stranger was. I looked at Marissa, really looked at her. Her beauty was sharp, like glass. Everything about her screamed ambition, but none of it whispered gratitude. She had been raised in a world where comfort was expected, not earned. And maybe that was the real chasm between us. David finally found his voice. Mom, why? He whispered, eyes glistening. Why didn't you tell me you were struggling? Why would you put yourself through this? I wanted to scream that he already knew, that he'd seen my hands swollen from needle pricks, that he'd heard me cough in the mornings when I skipped my medicine. But mothers are practiced liars when it comes to their pain. We hide it because love tells us to. Because you're my son. I said softly, because when you came to me with nothing, I couldn't stand by and watch you fall. My words seemed to hang in the air, heavy as chains. Marissa crossed her arms, her fury morphing into something more dangerous, contempt. So what now? You want us to worship you. You think a few checks give you the right to judge me. I leaned forward, my voice low but cutting. No, Marissa, what I want is respect. What I want is to stop being treated like a fool while I keep this family afloat. David's head dropped into his hands. I could see the boy he once was, the boy who used to run home with scraped knees, crying for Mama to make it better, except now, the wounds were deeper, and I wasn't sure I had enough bandages left. The cobbler cooled between us, untouched. And in that moment, I realized this dinner wasn't just a family gathering. It was the start of a reckoning. One way or another, the truth was going to change everything. The house was quieter than usual the morning after the confrontation. The clinking of dishes in the sink, the low hum of the refrigerator, even the faint creaks of the wooden floor seemed amplified. Mariah sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold, staring into it as though it might hold the answers to her life's unraveling. She could still hear Valerie's sharp words echoing in her mind. You're not even half the woman my mother is. It wasn't just the words themselves, it was the disdain in her voice. The way Robert hadn't defended her. Mariah wasn't blind. She knew her daughter-in-law never warmed to her. But to say it aloud, to spit it like venom across her own dining table, cut deeper than she thought possible. When Robert walked into the kitchen, his eyes immediately darted to her face, then away again, as if even looking at her carried a weight he couldn't handle. Morning, Ma, he muttered, pulling a glass from the cupboard. Mariah's eyes narrowed. Morning, that's all you've got to say to me after last night. Robert froze, hand hovering over the tap. I don't want to fight. You don't want to fight, Mariah repeated, her voice edged with bitterness. Robert, I sold your father's wedding ring to keep a roof over your heads, and what I get in return is silence while your wife humiliates me. Robert winced, shoulders curling inward. I didn't know what to say. You could have said something, she snapped, then immediately regretted the sharpness. But the damage was already done. Robert's face hardened, a wall slamming down behind his eyes. He set the glass on the counter with a dull thud. It's complicated, Ma. You think Valerie's just being cruel, but she's under pressure too. Mariah's laugh was humorless. Pressure? You think I don't know what pressure is? I worked 2 jobs while raising you alone after your father died. I know what real pressure is. Robert's jaw tightened. I lost my job, Ma, 2 weeks ago. The words landed like a stone in her gut. She blinked at him, stunned. What did you just say? He finally turned to face her, eyes full of shame. I didn't want to tell you. I thought I'd find something fast, but it's been harder than I expected. Valerie doesn't even know yet. Mariah's mouth went dry. Her son, the man she had raised with every ounce of her strength, was standing there confessing to a lie, one that explained the unpaid bills, the desperate requests for help, the endless tension. You've been lying to both of us, she whispered. I was trying to protect you, Robert said quickly. I didn't want you to worry. Her chair screeched back as she stood, the fury bubbling up hot and raw. Protect me, by letting me sell your father's ring, by letting Valerie tear me apart while you sat there mute. Robert flinched as if her words had struck him physically. I didn't ask you to sell the ring. No, you didn't, she shot back. But you made it necessary. Valerie appeared in the doorway then, hair still tousled from sleep, her silk robe loosely tied around her waist. She glanced between them, sensing the tension like smoke in the air. What's going on? She asked, voice flat. Robert hesitated, but Mariah cut in before he could speak. Your husband lost his job 2 weeks ago. Did he mention that to you? Valerie's eyes widened, then narrowed, fixing on Robert. Is that true? Robert's silence was answer enough. The temperature in the room dropped. Valerie crossed her arms, her mouth tightening into a thin line. So all this time, you let your mother bail us out while you pretended everything was fine. It wasn't like that, Robert said weakly. Mariah shook her head, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and despair. You let me become the villain in your wife's eyes while I was the only thing keeping this family from drowning. Valerie turned to Mariah then, her tone suddenly sharp. And you think that gives you the right to control us, to throw money in our faces every time you want obedience? Maybe Robert didn't tell me because he knew you'd use it as another weapon. Mariah gasped. A weapon? Valerie, I've sacrificed everything for this family. Valerie's lip curled. No, you sacrificed for Robert. Don't pretend it was for me. You've resented me from the moment we met. The truth of it, raw and undeniable, hung heavy in the kitchen. Mariah's fists clenched at her sides. She had tried, in her own way, to welcome Valerie, but deep down, she had always viewed her as an interloper, someone who couldn't possibly understand the bond she shared with her son, and Valerie knew it. Robert finally exploded, slamming his hand on the counter. Enough, both of you. His voice cracked under the strain. I can't do this anymore. Silence followed, thick and suffocating. He looked at Mariah, then at Valerie, his face pale. I'll figure something out, but I can't keep living like this, caught between you two. Something has to change. Later that night, Mariah sat alone in her bedroom, the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. Something has to change. For the first time, she wondered if the change needed to start with her. She thought about Michael Jenkins, the man who had called her just days ago, inviting her to Seattle. He had once been a close friend, someone who saw her not as Robert's mother or as a struggling widow, but simply as Mariah. The idea had felt absurd at first, leaving everything behind, even briefly, to chase something just for herself. But now, with her son's confession and Valerie's venom still stinging in her ears, the possibility seemed less like a fantasy and more like salvation. Could she dare? She turned off the light, but sleep didn't come. All she could see was the ocean she had never visited, the life she had never lived, and the faint glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. The following days unfolded with a tension that clung to the house like damp air. Meals were eaten in silence, the clatter of forks and knives louder than words. Robert moved like a man shackled to invisible chains, shoulders hunched, eyes constantly flicking between his mother and his wife, as though measuring the space between their tempers. Valerie grew colder by the hour, her tone clipped and her laughter absent. Mariah felt herself shrinking inside those walls, every corner echoing with resentment. She had once taken pride in creating a home filled with warmth, even if money was scarce, but now the house felt like a cage, each room a reminder of the sacrifices no one seemed to appreciate. On the third night, she found herself sitting at the small desk in her bedroom, a faded stationery set laid out before her. She picked up a pen, hesitated, then began to write. Dear Michael. Her hand shook slightly as she scribbled the name. She hadn't written to him in years, not since their paths diverged after high school. He had gone west, chasing dreams of business and travel. She had stayed, rooted in duty and survival. I don't know why I'm writing this, maybe because you called at the right moment, or maybe because I'm desperate for a reminder that life can be something more than sacrifice. You asked me to come to Seattle. I don't know if I can, but for the first time, I'm thinking about it. She stopped, staring at the unfinished letter. A knock startled her. She shoved the stationery into the drawer just as the door creaked open. It was Robert. Ma, he said softly, peeking in. You awake? She nodded. Couldn't sleep. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His face was weary, eyes bloodshot. Neither can I. He sat at the edge of her bed, the same way he had when he was a boy after nightmares. For a moment, she saw the child he used to be, frightened, seeking comfort, but now, the fears were heavier, the burdens adult-sized. I'm sorry, he murmured. For what? She asked, though her heart already knew. For letting things get this bad. For lying. For not defending you. His voice cracked. Valerie, she's angry. She feels like we're drowning. And she blames you because you're the one holding the lifeboat. Mariah's throat tightened. And what do you think? Robert hesitated. I think she's scared. I am too. Losing my job, it made me feel like less of a man, and every time you stepped in to fix it, it just reminded me of my failure. She softened, hearing the rawness in his tone. Robert, you are not a failure. Life knocks us down, but lying about it, letting your wife tear me apart, that's what hurts. He nodded, shame painting his face. I'll do better, I promise. For a fleeting second, she wanted to believe him, but promises had been made before. And still she had pawned her late husband's ring to keep them afloat. Son, she said gently, sometimes doing better means standing on your own 2 feet, even if it's hard. I can't keep saving you forever. Robert looked at her then, truly looked, as though realizing for the first time that she was not just his mother, but a woman who had her own breaking point. The next morning, Valerie cornered Mariah in the kitchen. You told him to choose, didn't you? Valerie accused, arms crossed. Mariah blinked. Choose between us. You want him to cut me loose so you can have him all to yourself. Mariah's mouth fell open. That's absurd. I've only ever wanted Robert to be happy. Valerie's laugh was sharp. Happy? He's miserable because you've smothered him his whole life. You don't know how to let go. The words hit Mariah like a slap. She steadied herself against the counter. I've kept him alive. Don't confuse sacrifice with smothering. Valerie stepped closer, eyes blazing. No, you've kept him dependent. And now he doesn't know how to stand on his own. That's on you. Mariah felt her chest tighten, fury and shame colliding inside her. For years she had believed she was doing what any mother would, shielding her child from the worst the world had to offer. But what if Valerie was right? What if her devotion had crippled Robert instead of saving him? Valerie's voice softened, though the venom remained. If you really love him, you'll step aside. Let him figure it out without you pulling the strings. That afternoon, while Valerie was out and Robert napped on the couch, Mariah wandered into the attic. Dust motes danced in the slanted sunlight. Boxers of old photographs, yellowed letters, and keepsakes surrounded her like silent witnesses. She opened one box and pulled out a framed picture, herself at 20, standing on the porch with her late husband, both of them laughing, arms wrapped tight. She barely recognized the woman in the photo, slimmer, brighter eyes full of possibility. She traced the glass with her fingertip. Where did she go? She whispered. Her gaze drifted to another box labeled Dreams. Inside were travel brochures she had collected decades ago: Paris, New Orleans, the Grand Canyon, places she never saw because there was always another bill to pay, another crisis to manage. And tucked between them was a postcard from Seattle. She remembered now Michael had sent it after his first year there. You'd love the ocean here. Come visit someday. Someday. The word gnawed at her. Maybe someday had finally arrived. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in bruised shades of purple and gold, Mariah stood on the porch with her phone in hand. Her thumb hovered over Michael's number, her pulse quickening. The door behind her creaked open. Robert stepped out, rubbing his eyes. What are you doing out here? He asked. She slipped the phone into her pocket. Just getting some air. He joined her, leaning against the railing. They stood in silence for a while, watching the horizon. You ever think about leaving? She asked suddenly. He frowned. Leaving, like moving, like starting over, going somewhere new, doing something just for yourself. Robert gave a humorless chuckle. I don't have that luxury. Mariah's eyes stayed on the fading light. Maybe you do. Maybe we both do. He glanced at her, suspicion flickering in his gaze. You're not planning something, are you? She forced a smile. Just thinking. But in her heart, the decision was beginning to crystallize. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, she returned to her desk and pulled out the half-finished letter. She read it over, then added a final line. Tell me if the invitation still stands, because I think I might need to take it. Her hand trembled as she sealed the envelope. It felt like pushing open a door that had been locked for decades, a door she wasn't sure she could close again. The storm didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, like water seeping under a door. By the end of the week, the house felt like it might implode from the weight of unspoken words. Valerie slammed cabinet doors louder than necessary, her movements sharp, deliberate. Robert drifted through the rooms like a ghost, avoiding both women whenever he could. And Mariah, she carried herself with a quiet detachment, her heart already leaning toward an escape she hadn't yet admitted. A loud dot, but the storm finally broke on a Saturday morning. It began with a bill. Valerie found it first, wedged between grocery ads and glossy catalogs. The envelope was thin but heavy with consequence. She tore it open at the kitchen table and scanned the lines, her face tightening with every sentence. Robert, she shouted. He shuffled in from the living room, hair disheveled, holding a half-empty mug of coffee. What is it? She thrust the paper at him. The electric bill. We're 3 months behind. They're threatening to shut us off. Robert's stomach sank. He had known it was coming, had shoved the unopened envelopes into drawers, like hiding them might erase reality. But now it was here, undeniable. I'll figure it out, he mumbled. Valerie's voice cracked. You'll figure it out? With what? You don't even have a job. Mariah entered then, drawn by the shouting. She glanced at the bill, then at her son's downcast face. Her chest ached with a familiar instinct, to fix it, to rescue him. But Valerie turned on her like a whip. Don't you dare, she hissed. Don't you dare swoop in again and make him weaker than he already is. Mariah stiffened. I'm not the enemy here. Yes, you are, Valerie snapped. Because every time you hand him money, you remind him that he's failed. You keep him a boy when he's supposed to be a man. Robert slammed his mug onto the counter. Stop it, both of you. But the words only fueled the fire. Mariah's voice rose. Do you think I like doing this? Do you think I enjoy selling the last pieces of my life to keep you both afloat? I do it because I love him, because I can't stand to see him suffer. And what about me? Valerie shot back. Do you love me too? Or am I just the woman who stole your son? The room pulsed with silence. The truth lay between them, raw and undeniable. Mariah opened her mouth, but no words came. Valerie's eyes filled with tears, not soft, vulnerable tears, but angry ones. That's what I thought. She shoved past them, the door slamming behind her. Hours later, Robert found Mariah sitting on the porch steps, staring at the quiet street. She hates me, Mariah whispered, not looking up. Robert rubbed the back of his neck. She doesn't hate you. She just feels trapped, like I do. Mariah finally turned her gaze to him. You're not trapped, Robert. You just have to take responsibility. Stand up, fight for your life. He sank beside her, elbows on his knees. What if I can't? What if I'm not strong enough? Her heart broke at the vulnerability in his voice. She wanted to wrap him in her arms, to promise she'd always make it better. But Valerie's words still echoed in her mind. You keep him a boy when he's supposed to be a man. Maybe she was right. Mariah reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. Then maybe it's time I stop standing in your way. Robert frowned, confusion flickering across his face. What does that mean? She hesitated, then shook her head. Nothing, just thinking out loud. But the thought was no longer abstract. It was a seed, sprouting roots. That evening, when the house finally quieted, Mariah sat at her desk once more. She picked up her phone, scrolled to Michael's number, and pressed call before fear could stop her. The line rang twice before his warm, steady voice answered. Mariah, her throat tightened. It's me. I was hoping I'd hear from you. He sounded genuinely pleased, like sunlight breaking through clouds. How are you holding up? She almost laughed. Barely. Things are bad here. Then maybe it's time to take a break, Michael said gently. Come out here, just for a week. No obligations, no judgment. Just breathe. Mariah closed her eyes, imagining the ocean waves he had once described, the salt air, the freedom. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of possibility. I don't know if I can, she whispered. Yes, you can, he countered. You've carried everyone else for so long. Let someone carry you for a change. Her eyes filled. Michael, say yes, he urged softly. Say yes, and I'll book you a ticket tomorrow. Mariah gripped the phone, her heart pounding. She wanted to say yes. God, she wanted it, but guilt clawed at her chest. Guilt for Robert, for leaving him to face consequences alone. I'll think about it, she said finally. That's all I ask. Michael replied, just think about yourself for once. When she hung up, the house seemed smaller than ever, the walls pressing in. She glanced toward the living room, where Robert slept fitfully on the couch, his face lined with exhaustion. He looked so young in that moment, so fragile. But Valerie's words returned again, slicing through her heart. You've kept him dependent. Maybe the only way to save him now was to stop saving him. That night, Mariah dreamed of the ocean. Waves crashed against jagged rocks, spraying her skin with cold mist. She stood barefoot on the sand, the wind tugging at her hair, and for once, she felt weightless. When she woke, her pillow was damp with tears, and in her chest, something had shifted. The door to escape was no longer just ajar, it was wide open. The morning air felt heavier than usual, pressing down on Mariah's chest as though the house itself disapproved of the thoughts in her mind. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, toothbrush dangling from her lips, staring at her reflection. The woman who looked back was not the Mariah she remembered. Her cheeks were fuller, her eyes etched with fatigue, her shoulders sagging under invisible weights. She hardly recognized herself anymore. But in her gaze there was also something new, a spark, faint but unmistakable. Seattle. The word pulsed like a heartbeat in her mind. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled of burnt toast. Robert was fumbling with the toaster while Valerie scrolled through her phone, lips pressed in a thin, disdainful line. Morning, Mariah said, her voice even. Neither of them responded right away. Robert muttered something unintelligible. Valerie didn't even look up. Mariah sat at the table, folding her hands in her lap. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, Valerie spoke, her tone sharp. We need money for the car insurance. It's due this week. Robert winced. Val, maybe we should know. She cut him off. We can't ignore it. If it lapses, we're screwed. Her eyes flicked toward Mariah then. as if daring her to reach into her purse like always. Mariah held her gaze, steady and unflinching. I don't have it. The words shocked even herself, a lie she had a little tucked away, just enough for a ticket. But for once, she wasn't going to bleed herself dry for them. Valerie's jaw tightened. Of course you don't. Robert's shoulders slumped, his voice barely above a whisper. We'll figure something out. Mariah rose from the table, her chair scraping against the floor. Yes, Robert, you will. And with that, she left the room, her heart pounding. That afternoon, she called Michael again. I can't stop thinking about what you said, she admitted, pacing her bedroom, about coming here. Yes. On the other end, Michael's voice warmed. Then do it. Don't think. Don't just come. Mariah closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. If I leave, they'll fall apart. Maybe that's what needs to happen, he said gently. Sometimes people only grow when the safety net is gone. His words pierced her like truth. When can you come? He asked. Mariah hesitated, then whispered, soon. That evening, Robert knocked on her bedroom door. Ma, can we talk? She let him in, bracing herself. He sat on the edge of her bed, twisting his hands together. Valerie thinks you're against her, that you want me to choose between you two. Mariah sighed. I don't want you to choose, Robert. I want you to stand up, to face life without leaning on me every time it gets hard. His eyes welled with tears. I don't know if I can. She touched his cheek, her heart aching. You'll never know until you try. For a moment, he looked like a lost boy again. But Mariah forced herself to pull her hand back. If she kept holding him, he'd never learn to walk. 2 nights later, the storm finally came. Valerie had found the travel brochure. It lay crumpled on the kitchen counter. When Mariah walked in, the glossy picture of Seattle's waterfront glaring up at her like a secret exposed. Valerie stood there, arms crossed, fury in her eyes. So it's true. You're planning to run away. Mariah's stomach clenched. I'm not running. I'm choosing. Choosing yourself over your son. Valerie spat. How selfish can you be? Mariah straightened her spine, meeting her gaze. For decades, I chose everyone but me. I think I've earned the right to choose myself once. Robert entered mid-argument, eyes darting between them. What's going on? Valerie thrust the brochure at him. Your mother's leaving us. The room spun with silence. Robert looked at Mariah, betrayal etched into his face. Ma, is it true? Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out. Yes, I need to go. I need to find out who I am beyond this house, beyond your struggles. Robert's voice cracked. You're abandoning me. The plea in his tone nearly shattered her resolve. But then she remembered the ring she had pawned, the sleepless nights, the contempt in Valerie's eyes. She remembered how small she had become inside her own life. No, Robert, she said firmly. I'm setting you free. Valerie let out a bitter laugh. Don't paint it noble. You're leaving because you can't handle the mess you helped create. Mariah's voice steadied. Calm as steel. Maybe, but either way, I'm leaving. She turned and walked away before the tears could betray her. That night, alone in her room, Mariah booked the ticket. Her hands trembled as she clicked confirm. But when the email appeared in her inbox, a strange peace washed over her. Seattle was waiting. For the first time in decades, so was her life. The apartment was silent, except for the steady hum of the refrigerator and the faint whistle of the wind sneaking through the old window frames. Denise sat at the kitchen table, elbows on the scratched wood, staring down at the unopened envelope in her hands. It had been 3 days since the confrontation with Valerie and Marcus, 3 days since her son's downcast eyes had finally revealed the truth about his job loss, 3 days since Valerie's cruel words had seared Denise's heart like acid. You're not even half the woman my mother is. Denise hadn't cried, not once. The tears refused to come. Instead, there was only a deep, gnawing ache that reached into her bones and settled there. The envelope contained a notice from the bank, past due, again. The rent she had been quietly covering for Marcus and Valerie had finally drained the last of her reserves. She had no more to give. Her hands shook as she set the envelope down. Then, almost instinctively, Denise stood and walked to the old dresser in her bedroom. She pulled open the top drawer, pushing aside socks and folded scarves until her fingers brushed against the small velvet box tucked into the corner. Her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't opened it in years. With trembling hands, she lifted the box and slowly cracked it open. Inside lay a gold wedding ring, its surface dulled with time but still holding the faint gleam of Memory. Anthony. Her late husband's name echoed in her chest. He had given her the ring on a cold December morning, standing nervously in front of her grandmother's house with snowflakes melting in his hair. Anthony had been her everything, her partner, her anchor, her steady hand in the storm. Denise swallowed hard, clutching the ring between her fingers. Selling it felt like betrayal, like chiseling away the last piece of the man who had loved her beyond reason. Yet as she stared at the small band of gold, she knew it was her only choice. The rent was due in 3 days. Without it, she would lose, not just her apartment, but the one place where Anthony's memories still lived. Her phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the silence. She glanced at the screen. Marcus. Her chest tightened. She let it ring until the buzzing stopped, then sat heavily on the edge of her bed. Marcus, meanwhile, sat in his car 2 blocks away, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. He had tried calling his mother all morning, but she wasn't answering. His chest burned with guilt, and the sound of Valerie's mocking voice still rang in his ears. For the past week, he had been sleeping on his friend Darren's couch. Valerie had packed her things and left after their fight, throwing her final words like daggers. I didn't sign up for a broke man and his clingy mother. Marcus wanted to believe she didn't mean it, but the truth was, she was gone, and now, the only person he had left was the same woman he had hurt the most. He got out of the car and trudged up the steps to Denise's building, rehearsing what he might say. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I should have been a better son. But when he knocked on the door, no sound came from inside. He pressed his ear to the wood, hearing nothing but silence. Mom, his voice cracked. It's me. Still nothing. Denise was sitting at the kitchen table again, the velvet box open in front of her. She had heard the knock. She had heard Marcus's voice, but her body refused to move. She wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, she slipped the ring back into the box, stood, and walked to her closet. From the top shelf, she pulled down a shoebox filled with old photographs. She hadn't looked at them in years, afraid of the ache they carried. One photo slid to the top. Marcus, age 8, grinning with 2 missing teeth as Anthony held him on his shoulders. Behind them, Denise stood laughing, her arms outstretched as if ready to catch them both. Her throat tightened. She traced Marcus's small, joyful face with her finger. Where had that little boy gone? When had he become a man who hid behind lies and let a woman belittle his own mother? The knock came again, louder this time. Mom, please, open the door. Her hands shook. She wanted to let him in. She wanted to wrap him in her arms and tell him everything would be okay. But she also wanted to scream, to demand why she had been left carrying the weight of his failures alone. Denise pressed her forehead to the cool wood of the door, her heart aching on both sides. Later that night, she found herself in front of a pawn shop. The neon sign buzzed faintly in the chilly air. She stood on the sidewalk, clutching the velvet box so tightly her knuckles hurt. Anthony, she whispered, looking down at the ring. Forgive me. Inside, the pawnbroker barely glanced at the ring before naming a price. Denise's heart sank. It was less than she'd hoped, but enough to cover the rent and groceries for another month. She walked out with cash in her purse and a hollow space in her chest. The next evening, Marcus returned to the apartment. This time, Denise opened the door. Her face was tired, her eyes shadowed, but she didn't turn him away. They sat at the kitchen table in silence for a long time. Finally, Marcus spoke. I know you sold something today. Denise's head jerked up. Surprise etched across her face. I saw the pawn ticket on the counter, he admitted. Was it Dad's ring? Her silence was answer enough. Tears filled Marcus's eyes, and for the first time in years, he let them fall. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I've been selfish. I let Valerie talk to you like that. I let you carry everything while I pretended I had it under control. And now, I made you give up the last piece of him. Denise's lips trembled, but no words came. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I promise I'm going to fix this. I'm going to be the man Dad would have wanted me to be, the son you deserve. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Denise finally whispered, you don't have to be Anthony. You just have to be Marcus. My Marcus. They sat together until the silence softened, and for the first time in weeks, Denise allowed herself to hope. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the nagging fear. Hope had failed her before. Would this time be any different? The morning sun slanted across the faded curtains, filling Denise's apartment with a pale, forgiving light. For the first time in weeks, she had slept through the night, but the restfulness she felt was fragile, like a thin layer of ice over deep water. Marcus had spent the night on the couch, wrapped in an old quilt Anthony used to keep in the car for road trips. She could hear his steady breathing, a rhythm that reminded her of when he was a boy, falling asleep in the back seat after a long day at the beach. Denise carried 2 mugs of coffee into the living room. She set one down on the chipped table beside him. "Thanks, Mom," he mumbled. Rubbing his eyes, she sat opposite him, cradling her own cup. "We need to talk about what comes next." Marcus nodded, his jaw tightening. "I've been thinking about that. Darren's cousin works at the shipping yard down by the harbor. They're hiring. It's not glamorous, but it's steady work. I'm going down there today." Denise studied his face, searching for signs of the old excuses, the half-truths, but instead, she saw determination, tinged with shame. "That's a start," she said softly, "but it's not just about work, Marcus. It's about how you treat people. How you treated me." His shoulders slumped. "I know, I've been blind. Valerie made me feel like I wasn't enough. And instead of fighting for myself, I dragged you down with me. You deserved better." The silence between them was heavy, but not suffocating. Denise sipped her coffee, her eyes drifting to the small desk in the corner. The drawer held dozens of unsent letters, pages she had written late at night when sleep wouldn't come, pouring out everything she could never say aloud. Letters to Marcus, letters to Anthony, even letters to herself. That afternoon, while Marcus went to the harbor, Denise pulled out the stack of letters. Some were yellowed with age, ink smudged from tears that had fallen years ago. She spread them across the desk, reading fragments aloud. "Dear Anthony, today Marcus came home with another failing grade. You would know what to say to him. I just raised my voice. I hate myself for it. Marcus, I'm so proud of the man you're becoming. I hope you never forget where you came from, or who fought for you. Anthony, the nights are the hardest. I still set your pillow beside me. Some days I swear I hear you calling my name." The letters blurred as her vision swam. She realized she had spent years speaking to ghosts in paper instead of the people still in front of her. Marcus came home late, his boots scuffed, his shirt damp with sweat. He looked different, worn, but alive. "They gave me a chance," he said, trying to hide a smile. "It's just loading trucks for now, but it's something." Pride stirred in Denise's chest, though she kept her tone even. "That's good, baby. That's real good." As he collapsed onto the couch, she placed a bundle of the old letters in his lap. "What's this?" he asked, frowning. "Pieces of me," she replied. "Things I never said. Some of them are ugly, some are full of love. But if we're going to move forward, you need to see all of me, not just the part that paid your bills." Marcus hesitated, then unfolded the top sheet. His eyes moved over the words, his lips parting slightly as he read. Denise sat in silence, bracing herself by the third letter. His hands were trembling. "Mom, you carried so much alone." She reached across the table, her voice steady. "Because I thought that's what mothers do. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe by protecting you from the weight, I kept you from growing strong enough to carry it yourself." Tears rolled down Marcus's cheeks. He pressed the letters to his chest. "I don't deserve you." "No," Denise corrected gently. "You don't, but you can try to become someone who does." The following week brought small changes that felt monumental. Marcus woke early, went to work, and came home bone-tired but proud. He started cooking simple dinners, letting Denise rest. He even fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom, something she had been nagging about for months. But there were also nights when he sat on the balcony alone, staring out at the city with an expression she couldn't read. The wounds between them were far from healed. One evening, Denise joined him outside. The air smelled faintly of rain, the streets glistening with reflected neon. "You thinking about her?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer at first. Finally, he whispered, "Yeah, Valerie, how she looked at me like I was nothing, how I let her look at you the same way." Denise placed a hand on his shoulder. "Son, people show us who they are when times get hard. She showed you. Believe her." He turned to her, his eyes raw. "Do you believe I can change?" She studied him, the grown man who was still somehow her little boy. "I believe you can try. That's all anyone can ask." One rainy Saturday, Denise decided to take a walk downtown. She passed a small bookstore tucked between 2 coffee shops. Something in the window caught her eye, display of journals bound in deep blue leather. On impulse, she stepped inside and bought one. That night, she began writing not letters to ghosts, but entries for herself. Today, Marcus came home smiling. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real. "I think maybe that's enough." For the first time, she wasn't writing to be heard. She was writing to heal. Meanwhile, Marcus found himself haunted by his father's absence. At the shipping yard, he worked alongside older men who spoke fondly of their kids, their wives, the lessons they tried to pass on. It made him wonder what Anthony would think of him now. One night, after Denise had gone to bed, Marcus sat at the desk with a blank sheet of paper. He began to write his own letter. Dad, I failed. I let Mom carry me when I should have carried her. I let a woman's words turn me against the person who loved me most. But I want to be better. I don't know how yet, but I want to try. When he was done, he folded the letter and slipped it into the drawer beside Denise's old stack. A silent promise, waiting. Days blurred into weeks. The weight between them lifted slightly, replaced by a cautious tenderness, but Denise knew something was still missing. One evening, while sorting through the mail, she found an invitation tucked among the bills. It was from Michael Jenkins, the old friend who had once suggested she visit Seattle. He was hosting a community event at a church hall, celebrating local volunteers. She stared at the invitation for a long time. For years, her world had shrunk to four walls, and Marcus's troubles. Maybe it was time to step outside again. At dinner, she set the invitation on the table. What do you think? She asked. Marcus glanced at it, then back at her. I think you should go. You deserve something that's just for you. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. For the first time, he sounded like the son she had always hoped for. That night, Denise sat at her desk with her new journal. She wrote one line before bed, maybe tomorrow, I'll start living for myself too. And for the first time in years, the thought didn't feel selfish. It felt like freedom knocking at her door. The evening air in the city was alive with sound, the hum of traffic, laughter from the corner bar, the faint strains of a street saxophone drifting through the autumn breeze. Denise stood outside the church hall, smoothing down her dress nervously. It wasn't fancy, just a soft burgundy-wrapped dress she had pulled from the back of her closet, but it felt like armor. For years, she had worn only what was practical, what was cheap, what could endure long hours of cleaning jobs and grocery runs. Tonight, for the first time in a long while, she had chosen something that made her feel like a woman again, not just a caretaker. Inside, the hall buzzed with warmth. Long tables were draped in white cloths. The smell of baked chicken and cornbread filled the air, and children darted between rows of folding chairs. At the center stood Michael Jenkins, his smile wide as he greeted guests. When he saw Denise, his face lit up. Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence, he teased gently. Denise laughed, a sound that surprised even her. It's been a while, Michael. Too long, he said, ushering her inside. Come on, I saved you a seat. The evening unfolded in waves of conversation and laughter. Michael introduced her to neighbors she hadn't spoken to in years. People who remembered her from Marcus's school days, from church bazaars, long past. They welcomed her as though no time had passed, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. When the program began, Michael stepped to the podium. He spoke of community, of resilience, of the quiet heroes who gave without asking for recognition. As he spoke, his eyes flicked to Denise, and she felt a blush creep into her cheeks. Afterward, as people mingled over dessert, Michael handed her a small envelope. What's this? She asked, frowning. Just a little something, he said. Open it later. Back home, after Marcus had gone to bed, Denise sat at her desk and unfolded the paper. Inside was a simple note, written in Michael's careful hand. Denise, you've spent so many years holding everyone else up. I think it's time you let someone hold you too. If you're willing, I'd like to be that person. Dinner next week. Michael, her breath caught. She pressed the note to her chest, torn between disbelief and a sudden, unfamiliar thrill. For years, she had convinced herself love was behind her, that her life was already written, that her role was to survive, not to bloom. But here was a man she trusted, offering her something she had almost forgotten how to want. The next morning, Marcus noticed the flush in her cheeks. You seem different, he said, over scrambled eggs. Denise hesitated, then slid the note across the table. Marcus read it, his eyebrows lifting. Wow, he said softly. Are you gonna go? She looked at him, uncertain. Do you think I should? Mom, Marcus said, his voice steady. You've done everything for me. Maybe it's time you do something for yourself. Dad would want that, and so do I. Her eyes stung with tears, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from possibility. Dinner with Michael was simpler, quiet restaurant with soft jazz playing in the background. He asked about her dreams, not her struggles. He listened when she spoke, really listened, without rushing to fix or dismiss her words. By the end of the night, Denise realized she was smiling in a way she hadn't in years. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Weeks passed. Marcus settled into his job at the shipping yard, coming home exhausted but proud. He began saving money, determined to one day pay his mother back for every sacrifice she had made. Their relationship was still scarred, but slowly, brick by brick, they were rebuilding trust. Valerie was gone, and neither of them spoke her name. Sometimes Denise caught Marcus staring at his phone late at night, scrolling through old photos, but he never called her. He was learning, slowly, to let go. One afternoon, Denise returned from the grocery store to find Marcus at the kitchen table, papers spread out in front of him. "What's all this?" she asked, setting down the bags. He looked up sheepishly. "Budgeting, trying to figure out how to stand on my own 2 feet, maybe even get my own place someday." Denise's heart swelled with pride. "That's my boy." For once, the words didn't feel like a hollow wish. They felt true. On a crisp Saturday morning, Denise took her journal to the park. She sat on a bench beneath a tree, the pages fluttering in the wind. Children laughed on the playground. Couples strolled by hand in hand. She wrote for hours, not about pain or sacrifice, but about hope. "I used to think my life was over, that I had already lived my best days with Anthony, and the rest was just endurance. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe life keeps giving us chances, if we're brave enough to take them." She paused, tapping her pen against the page, then added one final line. "It's never too late." That evening, Marcus returned from work with a small box in his hands. He set it on the table in front of her, eyes shining. "What's this?" Denise asked. "Open it." Inside was a simple gold ring, not new, not expensive, but carefully chosen. "I know it's not Dad's," Marcus said quickly, his voice trembling. "I know I can never replace what you gave up for me, but I wanted to give you something back, a symbol that I see you, that I'll never forget what you've done." Denise's throat closed. She slipped the ring onto her finger, tears spilling freely now. "It's beautiful," she whispered. For the first time in years, mother and son embraced without the weight of unspoken guilt pressing between them. Later that night, as Denise sat on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below, she thought about everything she had endured. The insults, the sacrifices, the endless nights of worry. She thought about Anthony, about Marcus as a boy, about Valerie's sneer, about the pawn shop and the ring she had let go. And she thought about the future diners with Michael, laughter with friends she hadn't seen in years, quiet mornings with her journal, and Marcus finally finding his place in the world. Her life wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was hers. And for the first time, that was enough. Epilogue. Months later, Denise found herself walking along the shoreline in Seattle, Michael's hand warm in hers. The ocean stretched out endlessly, the horizon painted gold by the setting sun. Back home, Marcus was thriving at work, saving for his own apartment, rebuilding himself piece by piece. He called her every evening just to say, "Love you, Mom." Denise closed her eyes, letting the salty breeze kiss her skin. She whispered the words she had written weeks before, words that had become her truth. "It's never too late." And with that, she smiled a smile of a woman who had finally remembered her worth.